Welcome to 5-Minute German Grammar. Thank you for watching. This presentation will examine German neuter nouns. You'll recall from the presentation on German nouns that all singular nouns have a grammatical gender. A noun that has neither a masculine or feminine gender is neuter. The German noun Auto, car, has a neuter grammatical gender, so its definite article is das. Don't forget that it is important to memorize the definite article with the noun. Although the grammatical gender of German nouns is sometimes difficult to determine, there are some rules that can help you. Fortunately, there's just a few rules governing neuter nouns. Let's take a look at these now. All diminutive constructions will be neuter. Nouns in their diminutive form indicate a smaller version of something, or communicate informality, cuteness, or affection. To turn a noun into its diminutive form, you add the suffix chen or line to the noun, and, if possible, add an umlaut to the noun vowel. For example, Baum, tree, becomes Bäumchen, little tree, and Tisch, table, becomes Tischlein, little table. There are also numerous dialect variations of the diminutive suffix. All infinitive verbs used as a noun, which requires the first letter of the verb to be capitalized, will be neuter. Essen, food, schreiben, document or writing, and das Kommen und Gehen, the act of coming and going, are all neuter. Most of the chemical elements in metals are neuter, such as helium, and Blei, lead. Notable exceptions are nouns ending in Stoff, such as Sauerstoff, oxygen, and a few other elements in metals such as Schwefel, sulfur. A good rule to follow is that if the noun ends in ium, it will be neuter. Nouns ending in tum will generally be neuter, such as Königtum, kingship, although there are some exceptions to this rule, such as Reichtum, riches. Many collective nouns with a ge prefix, such as Gebirge, group of mountains, or mountain range, are neuter. A collective noun is a collection of things taken as a whole. There are, however, many other nouns, such as Gedanke, thought, and Gewinn, profit, that are not neuter. Many nouns ending in o, such as radio, and Konto, bank account, will be neuter, although it is important to note that there are numerous exceptions. Disco, discotheque, and euro, the euro currency, are examples. Finally, the name of countries, cities, and continents, such as Schweden, Sweden, and Berlin, are neuter, although you need to be aware that exceptions to this rule, such as die Schweiz, Switzerland, and der Irak, Iraq, also exist. The 5-Minute German Grammar Series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square, remix and share. Welcome to 5-Minute German Grammar. Thank you for watching. This presentation will introduce the accusative case. German has 4 cases: nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. The nominative case is used to mark the subject of the sentence, which is the person or thing performing the main action in the sentence. It is also used to mark the predicate adjective or predicate noun in a sentence. You may want to review the presentation on the nominative case before learning about the accusative case. The accusative case, among other things, is used in German to mark the direct object of a sentence. The direct object receives the action performed by the subject of the sentence, which is marked by the nominative case. Both the nominative and accusative cases are used in the sentence you see on the screen. Der Mann hat den Kuchen. The man has the cake. As you continue your study of German, you will learn that cases can be reflected by the form of the definite article. Here, der indicates that a nominative masculine noun follows, and den indicates an accusative masculine noun follows. We will examine definite articles in a later presentation. For the time being, however, I want to step you through the reasoning behind why they are nominative and accusative. You'll remember that the subject of a sentence, which is always in the nominative case, is like the main actor on a stage, the person or thing performing an action. Here the main actor is der Mann, the man. And the action that the man is performing is the act of having or possessing something. This, however, raises a question. Well, what does he have? What person or thing receives the action of being possessed? And that is what the accusative case tells us here. The direct object expressed by the accusative case shows us who the recipient of the action is. Here the recipient is den Kuchen, the cake. It is easy to see how the nominative and accusative cases work together when the verb expresses a very physical action. Here we can perhaps visualize the man carrying or holding the cake. But the same relationship between nominative and accusative exists when the verb expresses no physical contact between the subject and its direct object. Here the man sees, sieht, the cake. In other words, the cake receives the action of being seen by the man. Or perhaps the man can even smell, riecht, the cake. The cake still receives an action, this time that of being smelled by the man. Even verbs expressing abstract concepts can use the accusative case. Here the man loves, liebt, the cake. The cake receives the action of being deeply appreciated by the man. Therefore, it must be in the accusative case. The 5-minute German grammar series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square, remix and share. Welcome to German Grammar Videos. Thank you for watching. This presentation will examine German adjectives with no endings, weak endings, and strong endings. The presentation will first introduce the concept of predicate and attributive adjectives in English before moving over to an examination of these forms in German. We will see that predicate adjectives in German do not take an ending, but attributive adjectives may take both strong and weak endings. After examining how weak adjective endings can be used after definite articles, we will then look at how strong and weak adjective endings can be used together in combination with ein and der words. Finally, we will examine how strong adjective endings are used with no preceding ein or der words. As we will not be going over der and ein words in this presentation, you may want to consult your textbook or conduct a web search to find out more about this topic. Let's get started. Adjectives are words that describe or modify another person or thing in a sentence. In the sentence you see on the screen, the university is small. The adjective, small, describes the size of the university, which is the subject of the sentence. As the adjective comes after the linking verb is, this adjective is a predicate adjective. German also has predicate adjectives. The sentence you see on the screen is a translation of the English sentence in the prior slide. As the adjective klein appears after the linking verb, it is a predicate adjective modifying the subject of the sentence, die Universität. It is important to note that predicate adjectives in German do not take any adjective endings. Attributive adjectives are different than predicate adjectives in that they appear before the noun they modify. In this slide, the attributive adjective small is placed between the noun university and the definite article the. German also has attributive adjectives. Unlike predicate adjectives, however, attributive adjectives require strong or weak endings. As we will see in the coming slides, these endings are determined 1. By whether the adjective is preceded by an ein word, a der word, or nothing at all, and 2. By the case, gender, and number of the noun that the adjective modifies. It is usually quite logical to determine the ending of an attributive adjective, although you may have to memorize a few charts. Let's take a closer look at the sentence from the previous slide. When working with adjective endings, it is important to read the sentence for grammatical clues. These clues will tell you which endings to use. I can see that Universität may be a singular noun as no plural endings are displayed. The verb ist, a third-person singular form of the verb sein, to be, confirms my suspicion that the noun is indeed in its singular form. Since the nominative case is always used after forms of sein, I can assume that Universität is the subject of the sentence, and that the definite article die refers to a feminine singular noun in the nominative case. Since all endings for attributive adjectives coming after definite articles will be weak, I need to find a feminine weak nominative ending to use in the sentence. I can now consult a chart for weak adjective endings to find the appropriate ending, which is E. You will note on the screen that weak adjective endings are either E or EN and follow very predictable patterns, which here are color-coded. Although you may at first have to consult your chart every time to determine the appropriate ending, repeated practice will increase your competence to the point that choosing the correct ending becomes second nature. The main thing is to be patient with yourself and not give up. Once we have determined the correct weak adjective ending, we simply add it on to each and every attributive adjective coming after the definite article and preceding the noun. Wo ist die kleine Universität? Where is the small university? Let's take a look at a slightly different sentence. Ich lerne Deutsch mit der klugen Studentin. I learn German with the smart female student. As with the sentence in the prior slide, I am provided with a definite article, der. The dative preposition mit, however, signals that the definite article, attributive adjective, and noun are all part of a dative prepositional phrase. The definite article der, therefore, cannot be a masculine nominative singular form, but rather must be a feminine dative singular form. As we have seen before, all the endings for attributive adjectives appearing after the definite article will be weak. I can consult a chart for weak adjective endings to find the appropriate ending for the feminine dative singular, which is en. With repeated practice, you will eventually memorize these endings and will no longer need to reference a chart. Once we have determined the correct weak adjective ending, we simply add it onto each and every attributive adjective coming after the definite article and preceding the noun. Ich lerne Deutsch mit der klugen Studentin. I learn German with the smart female student. Let's now take a look at adjective endings after ein words. Some problems emerge when using masculine and neuter ein words in the nominative. You will recall from your prior studies that these ein words do not take an ending. As you see in the sentence on the screen, das ist ein kleiner Student, that is a small male student, there is no ending after ein. The third-person singular verb ist helps me determine that the noun will be in the nominative case and is singular, but I may have problems if I do not know the gender of the noun I am working with. Is it masculine? Is it neuter? Since the ein word gives me no useful information as to case and gender, the ending of the attributive adjective needs to do so. This is what strong endings do. In this instance, you may need to look up the gender of the noun Student, which is masculine, if you do not already know it. Once I determine the gender of the noun, I use the information I already know about the case and number of the noun to find the appropriate strong adjective ending for masculine nominative singular, which is er. Once we have determined the correct strong adjective ending, we simply add it on to each and every attributive adjective coming after the indefinite article and preceding the noun. Das ist ein kleiner Student. That is a small male student. To summarize, strong adjective endings provide me with more information about the number, gender, and case of the nouns they modify than weak endings. Let's now take a look at how strong and weak endings work together. Since strong endings tell us as much as they can about the number, gender, and case of the nouns they modify, any other adjective endings coming thereafter can be weak. For the sentence you see here, Ich lerne mit ein klug Studenten, I learn with a smart female student, I will need both strong and weak adjective endings. Let's handle the strong ending first. Since Studenten is a singular feminine noun, and since mit is a dative preposition, I will need a strong adjective ending for a singular feminine noun in the dative case. Looking at a chart for strong adjective ending shows me that a strong adjective ending for a singular feminine noun in the dative case is er. Now that I have one strong adjective ending modifying the noun, all of the other adjectives thereafter will have weak endings. Looking at a chart for weak adjective endings shows me that a weak adjective ending for a singular feminine noun in the dative case is en. As I've mentioned before, learning these endings takes time but can be done. The main thing is to be patient with yourself and not give up. As you can see in the final sentence, all the adjective endings work together to show that the noun they modify is a singular feminine noun in the dative case. Although the prior slides have used primarily ein words to show how weak and strong adjective endings work together, the same pattern also holds for der words, such as dieser, this. Der words are so called as they act like and take the similar endings as definite articles. Here you can see how a strong adjective ending will be followed by weak adjective endings. Finally, there is the question of what to do when the noun is not preceded by any der or ein words. In the sentence you see on the screen, Ich lese lang Bücher, I read long books, nothing tells me about the case of the noun, its gender, or its number. The ending that will be added to the lone adjective in the sentence, therefore, will need to be strong. Since the noun will be the direct object of the first person singular verb lese, read, and the noun Bücher is plural, I will need to find a strong adjective ending for a plural noun in the accusative case. Looking at a chart for strong adjective endings shows me that a strong adjective ending for a plural noun in the accusative case is e. Adding this ending to the adjective produces the sentence you see on the screen. It is important to note that all adjective endings in a series that is not preceded by a der or ein word will be the same. As you can see on this slide, a strong adjective ending is also applied to the following adjective gut, good. And that concludes this presentation on German adjectives with no endings, weak endings, and strong endings. Although perhaps difficult at times, there is a logical pattern that can be memorized and consistently applied. The main thing is not to give up and to keep practicing. The German Grammar video series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square. Remix and share. Let's take a few moments to learn how to form the present perfect tense in German using irregular or mixed verbs. As usual, we'll begin the lecture with an example of how to form the present perfect tense in English. Once we're done with that, we will look at that same sentence translated into German. We'll see that the past participle is an essential part of the present perfect tense, and that irregular and weak verbs sort of have characteristics of both regular and strong verbs. So what we'll do today is we'll look at how to form the past participle of irregular verbs once we do a review of both regular and strong verbs. Now, finally, once we're done with all of that, we'll conclude our lecture with a discussion of when to use the auxiliary verb sein and when to use the auxiliary verb haben when forming the present perfect tense. So the sentence you see on the screen, I know the man, is in the present tense. It reports on an action that's happening right now in the present moment. I know the man. The subject, I, first person singular, personal pronoun, agrees with the verb, first person singular present tense verb. I know the man. Now, if I want to take this present tense sentence and change it into the present perfect, I'll need to do two things. First, the verb know needs to be changed into the past participle, so know becomes known. The second thing I need to do is, once I've changed the verb into a past participle, I still need to have some verb that agrees with the subject of the sentence. In this case, I'm going to use the first person singular present tense auxiliary verb have. So I have known the man. This present perfect tense construction, as you'll see, is then essentially formed of two components. First, I have a past participle. And second, I have an auxiliary verb that agrees with the subject of the sentence. The same construction of an auxiliary verb and the past participle can be found in German. And let me walk you through those steps again. So here on the screen you see the translation of the English sentence, I know the man, ich kenne den Mann. Ich, first person singular personal pronoun, agrees with the verb kenne, a first person singular present tense verb. Now if I want to take this present tense sentence and change it into the present perfect tense, I need to do two things. First thing is, I need to take the verb kenne and remove it from the second position. I'll get to and we'll move it to the end of the sentence and turn it into the past participle. We'll get to that stage in just a second. But once I remove it from the second position, that leaves a gap in the sentence that I need to fill with an auxiliary verb. Here I'm going to use the auxiliary verb habe, which agrees with the subject of the sentence. Subject, ich, first person singular personal pronoun, agrees with the first person singular present tense auxiliary verb habe. So, ich habe den Mann. So, what are we going to do, however, with the verb that we took out of the second position, kenne? We're going to change it into a past participle. So, kenne goes to gekannt. And we drop that in at the past participle at the very end of the sentence. And we get essentially what we had in English as a present perfect construction that has two components. The past participle, gekannt, at the end of the sentence or at the end of the clause, and in the second position, agreeing with the subject of the sentence, habe, a first person singular present tense auxiliary verb. Just as a way of quick review, weak verbs, the past participles of weak verbs, are generally formed by removing the stem of the verb, for instance, hören, removing the stem hör, adding a ge prefix to it, and a suffix or an ending, a t or an et, depending upon the quality or nature of the verb stem. So you get a construction like gehört or gesagt or gewartet. The main thing to note is that there's a ge prefix and a t or et suffix, and that the vowel in the stem does not change. Now, if you look at strong verbs also have a ge prefix, but it lacks the t or et suffix or ending. You'll also notice that the vowel in the verb stem usually changes. So, for instance, the verb beißen changes from an ei to an I. Beißen, gebissen. Fliegen changes from an IE to an O. Fliegen, geflogen. So the GE prefix is there. The EN ending is different than the weak verbs, and there's also a change in the quality of the vowel that's found in the verb stem. Now, comparing all these things side by side, you'll see that a weak verb, again, has a ge prefix, a t suffix, and that the stem vowel change stays the same. Strong verbs have a GE prefix. They do not add a T suffix, and that the stem vowel usually changes. Now, irregular verbs sort of manifest characteristics of both weak and strong verbs. Denken, the E in the stem of the vowel in the stem of the verb changes from an E to an A, like it does in a strong verb, but it adds a GE and a T, a GE prefix and a T suffix, like a weak verb does. Same thing with bringen. Bringen. I goes to an A, adds a GE prefix and a T suffix. And kennen, the one we've been looking at in our example at the beginning of this video, changes from an E to an A and adds a GE prefix and a T suffix. So, to summarize, irregular verbs manifest characteristics of both weak and strong verbs. Generally, irregular verbs can be found in the same list that you will find strong verbs in. And these are at the back of the book if you have it, or can be found through a search on the internet. Now, finally, the question of when do I use the auxiliary verb haben, when do I use the auxiliary verb sein? A general rule of thumb is, if your verb or the participle shows motion, in this instance on the screen, ich bin im Auto gefahren, I drove in the auto, I drove in a car. Motion is indicated. I'm moving from point A to point B in my car. So if the participle shows motion, I use some form of sein as the auxiliary verb. Ich bin. Now, another rule of thumb is, if the participle shows a change of condition, ich bin Polizist geworden, I became a police officer. One instance, I'm a college professor. Next one, I'm a police officer. The geworden shows a change of condition. The past participle of werden is geworden. I use a form of sein as an auxiliary verb. Ich bin Polizist geworden. Now, everything else generally uses the auxiliary verb haben. Ich habe sie gesehen. I have seen her, or I've seen them. There's no motion involved. There's no change of condition involved. Gesehen, the past participle of sehen, or to see, is reporting on the action of me seeing this person or seeing these people. So, since there's no motion or change of condition, I use the auxiliary verb haben. Now, that being said, there are, of course, a few small exceptions. And those are some verbs like sein itself, bleiben, to remain, or to passieren, happen to take sein as an auxiliary verb automatically. So the sentence you see on the screen, ich bin in Berlin gewesen, I was in Berlin. Gewesen is the past participle of sein. So since it is the past participle of sein, I'm going to use some form of sein as the auxiliary verb in the second position. Ich bin in Berlin gewesen. So that concludes our discussion of the present perfect tense using irregular or weak, irregular or mixed verbs. Welcome to 5-Minute German Grammar. Thank you for watching. This presentation will introduce the nominative case. German has 4 cases: nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. The nominative case is used to mark the subject of the sentence, which is the person or thing performing the main action in the sentence. It is also used to mark the predicate adjective or predicate noun in a sentence. Let's take a look at all of these uses in turn. The subject of a sentence is always in the nominative case. Using the analogy of the German sentence as a stage, the subject is the main actor on this stage, the person or thing performing an action. In the sentence you see on the screen, ich sitze hier, I am sitting here, the first person singular personal pronoun ich performs the action of sitting. Therefore, it is in the nominative case and the subject of the sentence. The adverb hier simply describes the place where the action is being performed. Subjects can also be inanimate objects. In this sentence, der Computer funktioniert gut. The computer works well. The masculine noun der Computer performs the action of working. Therefore, it is in the nominative case and the subject of the sentence. The adverb gut simply describes the manner in which the action is being performed. Predicate adjectives are also in the nominative case. Predicate adjectives are simply adjectives that appear after a linking verb in a sentence and, in essence, provide more information about the subject. In the sentence you see on the screen, das Auto ist rot, the car is red, the neuter noun, das Auto, is the subject of the sentence and therefore in the nominative case. The adjective rot is also in the nominative case as it appears after the linking verb ist. Predicate nouns are also in the nominative case. Like predicate adjectives, predicate nouns are simply nouns that appear after a linking verb in a sentence and provide more information about the subject. In the sentence you see on the screen, Ich bin Professor, I am a professor, the first person singular personal pronoun ich is the subject of the sentence. It is therefore in the nominative case. The masculine noun Professor is also in the nominative case as it appears after the linking verb bin. It may be useful for you to think about predicate nouns and adjectives in terms of an equal sign. When a linking verb appears in a sentence, then both sides of the sentence, the subject and predicate, will be in the nominative case. Finally, it is important to note that other verbs besides forms of sein, to be, can also function as a linking verb. In this sentence, Ich werde Professor, I become a professor, the verb werde simply reports on the subject's change of being. Since no real action is described in the sentence, both subject and predicate are in the nominative case. In the sentence you see here, sie bleibt ruhig, she remains calm, the verb bleibt simply links the subject with a state of being. Since no real action is depicted, both the subject and predicate are in the nominative case. The 5-minute German grammar series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square, remix and share. Welcome to Wege in den Beruf, German for your career. Thank you for watching. This presentation will introduce you to German infinitive verb forms and the present tense conjugation pattern of German verbs. By the end of this presentation, you will have learned about the infinitive verb form in German and the basic conjugation pattern for German verbs. In addition, you will have learned about variations on this conjugation pattern for verbs with roots ending in D and T and verbs with roots ending in Z, S, or Estzet. There are also some irregular verbs that occur frequently, sein und haben, and we will take a look at these conjugation patterns as well. Finally, we will apply what you have learned to complete the associated online course activity. Let's get started. There are two components to the full infinitive construction in English, the particle to, which precedes the verb, and the verb itself. German, however, usually does not rely on a particle to form the infinitive, although one could say that the German infinitive form has two components, the verb root and the infinitive ending. This is the infinitive form that you will always find in German dictionaries. The verb you see on the screen, for example, sammeln, meaning to collect or gather, has the verb root, sam, and the infinitive ending, eln. German verbs can also have the infinitive ending ern, as you see on the screen of the verb wandern, meaning to hike or wander. A small number of German verbs have the infinitive ending ihren, as you see on the screen with the verb reflektieren, meaning to reflect. The majority of German verbs, however, have the infinitive ending n, as you see on the screen with the verb wohnen, meaning to reside. As most German verbs have the infinitive ending n, the remainder of this presentation will examine the conjugation patterns for verbs with this infinitive ending. You can consult your course textbook or conduct a web search to find out more about the conjugation patterns for the other verbs. There are three basic steps for conjugating a German verb. The first step simply requires you to have a verb in the infinitive form. In the second step, you isolate the verb stem by removing the infinitive ending. For the verb you see on the screen, this means you drop off the infinitive ending n, leaving you with the verb stem wohn. Next, in the third step, you add an ending to the verb stem from the basic present tense conjugation pattern. The verb ending must agree both in number and person with the subject of the sentence in order to create subject-verb agreement. In other words, if the subject of the sentence is ich, a first-person singular personal pronoun, then I am required to use the first-person singular verb ending from the conjugation pattern, ich wohne. This method of combining endings to the root of a verb according to the subject of the sentence is valid throughout the conjugation pattern. Du wohnst, sie es wohnt, wir wohnen, ihr wohnt, sie wohnen. There are, however, some exceptions to this conjugation pattern. For verbs with a root ending in d or t, such as the verb finden, meaning to find, the conjugation pattern for the second and third person singular, as well as for the second person plural, inserts an extra e between the verb root and ending. This makes sense if you think about it, as without this extra vowel, the resulting three consonants would be very difficult to pronounce. Instead, what we have with the addition of the extra e is a very pronounceable verb conjugation pattern. Ich finde, du findest, sie es findet, wir finden, ihr findet, sie finden. Likewise, for verbs ending in z, s, or st, the basic conjugation pattern is slightly modified in order to make the verbs more pronounceable. In the example you see on the screen, the verb heißen, to be called, has a root ending in st. In this case, the s in the second person singular ending st is dropped. This pattern results in the second and third person singular and the second person plural verb forms looking alike. Ich heiße, du heißt, sie es heißt, wir heißen, ihr heißt, sie heißen. Finally, there are some verbs that are used very frequently and are irregular. These conjugation patterns simply need to be memorized. The conjugation pattern for the first verb, sein, or to be, is ich bin, du bist, sie es ist, wir sind, ihr seid, sie sind. For the verb haben, or to have, the be is removed from the end of the verb root in the second and third person singular. Ich habe, du hast, sie es hat, wir haben, ihr habt, sie haben. Let's now take a look at how we could apply the present tense conjugation of pattern of German verbs. The explanations that follow will help you to complete the related online course activity. In the example you see on the screen, the infinitive verb sein, or to be, needs to be conjugated so that it agrees in both number and person with the subject of the sentence, mein Lebenslauf. Closer examination of the noun Lebenslauf reveals that it is the singular and not the plural form of the noun. Furthermore, I am not the Lebenslauf, and neither am I talking directly to it, meaning that the subject of the sentence cannot be in the first or second person. By excluding these other options, I can deduce that Lebenslauf must be a third-person singular masculine noun. I can test this deduction by replacing the noun with a personal pronoun, which is also in the third-person singular. Now that I have determined that the subject of the sentence is in the third-person singular, I take the infinitive of the irregular verb sein and look for the matching third-person singular form in the conjugation pattern. I then take this form, ist, and drop it into the sentence. The completed sentence, ist hier, manifests subject-verb agreement in that both the pronoun and the associate verb are in the third person singular. We can also do the same procedure with the infinitive of a regular verb, wohnen, or to live. We take the infinitive form, drop off the ending, add the ending for the third person singular from the basic conjugation pattern, and drop this form, wohnt, into the sentence. The completed sentence, wohnt hier, manifests subject-verb agreement in that both the pronoun and the associated verb are in the third person singular. This concludes the presentation on German infinitive verb forms and the present tense conjugation pattern of German verbs. Be sure now to test your knowledge by completing the related online course activity. Wege in den Beruf is a production of German Studies at Elon University. The course is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square. Remix and share. Okay, up to this point, we've looked specifically at two types of prepositions. We've looked at prepositions that take an accusative object, and we've also looked at prepositions that take a dative object. Now, what we're going to look at today is something called two-way prepositions. Of course, as the name suggests, these are prepositions that could be either one or the other. They could be either dative or they could be accusative, depending upon whether they describe a location or a direction. So if I were to describe a location using a two-way preposition, I will use the dative case. If I describe a direction or a motion with a two-way preposition, I will use the accusative case. Now this seems sort of like splitting hairs, but actually it's very useful in German and is actually used quite frequently. As usual, we're going to begin our presentation with our discussion of two-way prepositions with an example in English. Now, I'm using this example not to show how German is similar to English, but I'm going to actually show how they diverge on this point. German offers much more nuanced expression with two-way prepositions than English does. In fact, we'll look at an example in English that is quite ambiguous because English lacks two-way prepositions, or the clarity that two-way prepositions describe. We're going to then look at a list of two-way prepositions. I'll kind of go through them and then look at some contractions that are commonly used with two-way prepositions. So let's take a look now at the English example. Hans is running behind the house. We have Hans in front of the house and we have a backyard. Now, I could look at the sentence, if you think about it, in two ways. The first way, I guess the first way, the more commonly thought way, would be this, that he is in the front of the house and something's going on in the backyard. He wants to find out, so he runs behind the house to find out what's going on. So he's in the front, he's running behind the house into the backyard. Now the other way, if you think about it, which also makes perfect sense, is this, that he's in the backyard and he's within the confines of the backyard, the location of the backyard. The general location is the backyard. But they're playing a game. The game is hide and go seek, and so they're running around, and he's still behind the house. He just happens to be running behind it. So which one is correct? I guess they both are, depending upon what you want to say. However, English doesn't really distinguish between these two options, and therefore it can be ambiguous unless we offer further clarification. Now, German, on the other hand, is quite clear with the example. And it is clear because it uses something called two-way prepositions. So let's look at two-way prepositions before we return to our example of Hans. So the first question up at the top, wohin geht Frau Schmidt? You'll recall that wohin means where to, whither. It indicates motion away from the speaker. So I'm not interested where she's at, I'm interested where she is going. Now, the answer to this uses a two-way preposition, in. Sie geht in die Bäckerei. Die Bäckerei is feminine, the bakery. So she's going into the bakery. I'm asking the question, where is she going? Well, she's going into the bakery. Since I'm dealing specifically with motion here, some type of motion is indicated, I'm going to use the accusative form of the two-way preposition in. However, let's say I really don't care about where Frau Schmidt's going. I want to know where she's at. So, wo ist Frau Schmidt? So, it's not wohin. I'm not interested in where she's going. I'm actually interested in where she's at. Therefore, my question concerns largely position. So, where is she at? Where is she located? What is her position? Now, I'm still going to use the same two-way preposition in. However, this time, since I'm talking about position, I'm going to use the dative. You'll recall that die, feminine, goes to der dative. So, sie ist in der Bäckerei. So, where is she at? She's located inside the bakery. So, to summarize, if I'm interested in position, I use the two-way preposition with the dative. If I'm interested in motion, I use the two-way preposition with the accusative. So let's return to our example of Hans. So Hans, in the front of the house, he's running. Läuft hinter das Haus. Since he's running behind, he's in the front yard, he's running behind the house into the backyard. There's some type of motion involved here, and I'm going to use the accusative form of the two-way preposition hinter. And you'll recall that das Haus, neuter, is the same in the accusative, das Haus. Now, the next example is, you recall, he's in the backyard running around. Now, I'm still going to use the same two-way preposition, hinter, but now the action is confined within the parameters of the backyard. So he is running around. So it is motion, yes, but it's motion within a prescribed area, and that prescribed area is behind the house. So Hans läuft hinter dem Haus. I'm using dative. You'll recall that das Haus goes to dem Haus in the dative. So two-way prepositions are motion, accusative, position, dative. Now, what are the two-way prepositions? On this slide and the next slide, I have the list of two-way prepositions. Now, each preposition is sort of, there's always nuances, shades of meaning. This comes with practice of the language. Prepositions are notoriously hard to master. We have an, which is English, is at, near, or on. And this is on in the sense of a vertical surface. Hanging a picture on the wall, I would use the German two-way preposition an. Wohin geht Peter? The question is, whither does he go? An den See. He's going to the lake. Here, colloquially, if I go to a lake, I use the preposition an. Now, the next one is asking about position. Wo ist er? An dem See. He's at the lake. Now, auf is a two-way preposition for on top of a horizontal surface, or at a place. Wohin geht Anna? So where is she going? She's going on to the mountain, on top of the mountain. She's climbing the mountain. I'm going to use auf den Berg. Der Berg, mountain. It will change to den in the accusative. Now I'm asking, where is she at? Wo ist sie? Auf dem Berg. So she's physically located on top of the mountain. That's her position. That's what I'm asking about. I use the dative. Hinter, we've already looked at. Behind and back of. In could mean in or into, depending upon, is it a position or is it a motion? Wohin geht Gabi? In das Lokal. She's going into the establishment. Accusative. Wo ist Gabi? Where is she? In dem Lokal. It's going to be dative. Neben means next to. Wohin geht Jens? Neben den Biergarten. He's going next to the beer garden. He's going, the beer garden's on the side. He's going along next to it, walking past it. Wo steht Jens? Where is he standing now? Neben dem Biergarten, right next to the beer garden, waiting for us to join him at the table. Next slide. Über means above, about, or over. Positions. Wohin hängst du das Bild? So where are you hanging the picture? It's in my hand. I want to hang it now onto the wall. I'm going to hang it on the wall, but it's going to be above the table. So I'm hanging the picture
over the table, I would use the accusative über den Tisch. Now that I'm done hanging it, the process, the action, the motion of hanging it is done. I'm going to describe where it's located physically, its position. It's still above the table, but now it's hanging there. I use the dative, über dem Tisch. Same thing with unter, underneath or among. Wohin geht Peter unter die Menschen? He's going to be with the people. Where is he now? Unter den Menschen, amongst the people. Vor is sort of the opposite of opposite of hinter, which we looked at with the house. Vor das Haus, vor dem Haus, in front of or before, and in zwischen, between two objects. So wohin läuft das Kind? So where is the child running? Which is, I guess, as a parent, sort of a dangerous thing for children to do. Child is running between the cars. So in one instance, the child is not between the cars, and now she's running between the cars. This shows motion. I'm going to use the accusative, zwischen die Autos. Wo ist das Kind? Now, where is it now, besides being run over? It's now between two cars, physically located there, zwischen den Autos. Den Autos would be plural dative. So those are the all the two-way prepositions. Now, normally with two-way prepositions, we say we have the preposition itself followed by the definite article. So, for instance, auf dem. What we can see, however, with contractions is there are a few that we could shorten based on colloquial usage. So an dem goes into am, an das goes to ans, in dem goes into im, in das goes into ins. Now there are some other ones like auf dem goes to aufm, but these are purely colloquial that you use in everyday speech. These are not what you call High German. The ones you see on the screen, these four, are High German contractions, and you'll see these all the time in newspapers and things like that. So, two-way prepositions, lots of fun.
Welcome to 5-Minute German Grammar. Thank you for watching. This presentation will introduce accusative prepositions. In English, a prepositional phrase is a group of words that functions either as an adjective or an adverb in a sentence. That is to say, it could modify either a noun or a verb. At its most basic level, a prepositional phrase consists of a preposition and the object of the preposition. Here the object of the preposition is a simple noun phrase, the forest, although the object could contain other modifiers. Since this prepositional phrase, through the forest, modifies the manner in which the subject goes, it functions as an adverb in the sentence. German also has prepositions, which are classified as being either accusative, dative, or two-way, either accusative or dative. The preposition you see on the screen, durch, is an accusative preposition meaning through. Ich gehe durch den Wald. I go through the forest. And like English, the preposition also has an object, which here is again a simple noun phrase. You will notice, however, that the object of the preposition is in the accusative case. This brings us to an important rule about accusative prepositions. Any noun that is the object of the preposition must be in the accusative case. Here, once I make der Wald, which is in the nominative case, the object of the accusative preposition, the masculine definite article must be changed into its accusative form to show that it is the object of the preposition. Furthermore, everything inside of the prepositional phrase, between the preposition and its object, must also be in the accusative case. We could, for example, insert more adjectives into the phrase. Ich gehe durch einen dunklen alten Wald. I go through a dark old forest, and they would all take accusative endings. There are, of course, some important exceptions to this rule, but this is an advanced grammar topic that I will cover in a later presentation. For the time being, simply think of everything in an accusative prepositional phrase as being in the accusative case. There are 7 accusative prepositions in German: bis, by, until, to, durch, by, through, entlang, down, along, für, for, gegen, against, for, ohne, without, and around, for, at a point in time. Some of these seem to have the same definition in English, but in actuality, there are slight differences in meaning that need to be examined in greater detail. Since this examination will take a bit of time, I will do this in a later presentation. The 5-Minute German Grammar Series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square, remix and share. Welcome to 5-Minute German Grammar. Thank you for watching. This presentation will explain the difference between the verbs kennen and wissen. Although both kennen and wissen translate as to know in English, there is a slight difference in meaning between the verbs. Kennen means to know a person, and wissen means to know a fact. Kennen has a regular conjugation pattern with no stem vowel changes, whereas wissen, as we have seen in an earlier presentation, has a stem vowel change and an unusual conjugation pattern in the first, second, and third person singular. Let's take a closer look now at how to use these two verbs. In the sentence you see on the screen, Ich kenne Hans, I know Hans, the direct object of the verb is Hans. Since the direct object is a person, the verb kennen must be used. We can also use kennen with objects. In the sentence you see here, Ich kenne die Stadt, I know the city, the direct object is not a person, although living in the city allows me to know it as if it were a person, and I have developed a close relationship to it. Since the object has been personified in this manner, the verb kennen can be used. The verb wissen, however, can only be used with facts. The sentence on the screen illustrates this point. Ich weiß, dass Hans hier ist. I know that Hans is here. Although Hans is still the subject of the subordinate clause, additional information has been provided. It is this information, the fact that Hans is present, that is known. A good tip to know is that the verb wissen often launches a subordinate clause. As you see on the screen, a subordinate clause begins with a subordinating conjunction and is set off from the lead sentence by a comma. The verb always comes at the end of the clause. We will discuss subordinate clauses in a later presentation. Finally, wissen can also take a direct object, here a third-person singular neuter personal pronoun. Ich weiß es, I know it. However, this can only be done if the fact to which this pronoun refers has already been established. For example, the fact that Hans is present, expressed in the subordinate clause in the first sentence, is referenced by the personal pronoun in the second sentence. The 5-Minute German Grammar Series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square, remix and share. Welcome to 5-Minute German Grammar. Thank you for watching. This presentation will introduce possessive adjectives in the nominative and accusative cases. In English, an adjective shows ownership of something or a relationship between things. The possessive adjective must agree with the number, person, and, when applicable, gender of the possessor. For example, in the sentence you see on the screen, her is a third-person singular feminine possessive adjective that agrees with an understood person owning the car. She, a third-person singular personal pronoun. Another important point is that the possessive adjectives must be placed before the thing that is being possessed. In this sentence, her comes before car, indicating ownership of the vehicle. German possessive adjectives function in much the same way, although with important differences we need to be aware of. Let's take a look at them now. Like English, possessive adjectives in German are organized by number, person, and gender. Mein, first-person singular. Dein, second-person singular. Sein, masculine third-person singular. Ihr, feminine third-person singular. Sein, neuter third-person singular. Unser, first person plural, euer, second person plural, ihr, third person plural. The formal possessive adjective, both singular and plural, is ihr, which has a capitalized first letter. You may have noticed that some of the possessive adjectives have ein in the roots, which helps to explain why these adjectives are declined like indefinite articles. Even if an adjective does not have ein in its root, such as ihr, it still follows the same declension pattern. You may find it useful to review the presentation on indefinite articles before continuing with this one. Let's decline a few possessive adjectives to see how they work. In this sentence, das ist ein Tisch, that is his table, the number and gender of the understood possessor, agrees with the number and gender of the possessive adjective. It is third person singular masculine. But since the masculine noun Tisch is in the nominative case, the ending for the possessive adjective must also be masculine nominative. This changes, however, when the masculine noun is in the accusative case. Ich sehe seinen Tisch. I see his table. The possessive adjective still agrees with the number and gender of the understood possessor, but here the ending must show that the adjective modifies a masculine noun in the accusative case. Let's see what happens when we change the possessive adjective. In this sentence, the number and gender of the understood possessor, sie, agrees with the number and gender of the possessive adjective. It is third person singular feminine. But since the masculine noun Tisch is still in the nominative case, the ending of the possessive adjective must also be masculine nominative. And when the masculine noun is in the accusative, the ending for the possessive adjective must also be masculine accusative. Finally, as you see on this screen, it is important to note that the second person plural possessive adjective euer has some unusual forms in the nominative and accusative. The rule here is that if euer adds an ending when being declined, then the second e in the root will be dropped. So in this sentence, we don't remove e from the root since the possessive adjective modifies a noun that is the subject of the sentence. The adjective, therefore, is in the nominative case and does not take an ending. However, in this sentence, we remove e from the root since the possessive adjective modifies a noun that is the direct object of the sentence. The adjective must therefore have a masculine accusative ending. The 5-Minute German Grammar Series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square, remix and share. Welcome to 5-Minute German Grammar. Thank you for watching. This presentation will introduce yes-no questions. As you see here, English yes-no questions are characterized by the conjugated verb being placed in the first position, or at the very beginning of a sentence. Yes-no questions are so called because they do not demand a detailed response in the manner that interrogative words do. A simple yes or no suffices. Of course, you can provide additional information beyond a simple yes or no, but this is not necessary. If you do not provide this information yourself, however, the person with whom you are speaking will probably ask for more information with an interrogative word. For example, well, where is she? Even when using progressive forms to ask yes-no questions, a conjugated form of the verb to be must appear in the first position. The progressive construction in English describes an ongoing event and consists of a conjugated form of the verb to be in the present participle of a verb. The present participle of a verb is formed by simply adding an ing ending. It is important to note that German does not have a progressive construction. German forms yes-no questions in the same manner as English, that is, with the conjugated verb in the first position. In the sentence you see on the screen, ist sie in der Bibliothek? Is she in the library? There is subject-verb agreement between the ist, third-person singular form of sein, and the subject sie, third-person singular feminine personal pronoun. The question is answered with a negative nein, and additional information is volunteered. Sie ist zu Hause. She is at home. Any conjugated verb can appear in the first position, not just some form of sein. For example, in the sentence you see on the screen, studierst du an der Uni? Do you study at the university? A second-person singular form of studieren is in the first position, which creates subject-verb agreement with the subject du. second person singular personal pronoun. The question is answered with an affirmative Ja, with additional information being volunteered. Ich studiere da. I study there. The 5-minute German grammar series is produced by David Neville, Associate Professor of German. The videos, scripts, and lecture slides are released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share Alike 4.0 International License. Don't be a square, remix and share.